I met Rich probably about 10 years ago when I saw his first presentation at one of the large conferences, and I've actually had him come into building products at the Madison site and did a situational awareness for operations and not necessarily ERT. Again, was a great presentation, but he's a firefighter by trade, retired fire chief that got bored and went back to school and became a doctor. And so he's one of the leading situational awareness, cognitive neuroscience individuals in the fire service, period. So I appreciate you, Rich, jumping on and joining us, and the floor is yours.
Okay. Thanks, Brian. Welcome, everybody. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you this afternoon. This is a no-selling zone. I'm not trying to sell you anything at the end of the program. Sign up for coaching or whatever they do on webinars. There's going to be none of that. This is all purely educational. Allow me to take a moment to introduce myself. I spent 33 years serving as a first responder, including 22 years as an emergency scene incident commander. As Brian mentioned, about 5 years before I retired, I went back to school and I earned a PhD doing research in cognitive neuroscience, trying to understand what happens to the first responders when they're in high risk, high consequence environments, and how neurologically does that impact situational awareness and then subsequently their decision making. I've authored 6 books on the topics of situational awareness and high risk decision making. And I have a website if you'd be interested in learning some more. There's a lot of really good resources on the website completely for free for you. There's over 400 blog articles that are free. You don't have to sign up or subscribe. They're just there, and you search them out and click on them and read them to your content. And I also have a podcast, which I guess I should call a show because podcasts are on an audio platform. And I actually also have it on YouTube now. So there's over 300 episodes on the show where I talk about situational awareness and I interview people who've had near misses. If you would be interested in taking a deeper dive to learn more about situational awareness, especially as it relates to responding to emergencies, I do have an online academy with about 6,000 graduates now to the online academy. And I've presented versions of this program to over 87,000 people worldwide. And as Brian mentioned, including for some of his folks there at the Madison plant. Most of my situational awareness programs are full-day programs. So what does this mean for us today? It simply means that I'm not going to be able to cover everything that I would want to cover with you in a 1-hour format. And I certainly don't want to hold you on a virtual program for 8 hours. That would be something just short of torture. So what I'd like for you to do is, if you're inspired, is to swing over to the website and use some of those free resources to help you to learn more about the topic than perhaps what we can cover today. Why is situational awareness so important for individuals and teams working in high-risk environments? The answer to that question is pretty simple. It's because it's the foundation for good decision making. Now, it's completely logical that the better you understand a situation, the better your decision making will be. That's maybe like a no-duh statement. But there's a weird thing about situational awareness, and that is you can have terrible situational awareness, horrible situational awareness, zero situational awareness, and still make a great decision. We call that lucky. And out there in the world, there are a lot of people who have lucked their way into successful outcomes. And in fact, I would put myself in that category. As I look back through my career at incidents that I had responded to, it is easy for me to identify a fairly long list of incidents where I really didn't know truly what was going on. I thought that I did in the moment, but the truth of the matter is that after the fact, I found out that I didn't, and realized just how lucky I was to have the outcome turn out as successful as I did. So let's see if we can figure a way to program out some of the luck and replace it with a skill set that can actually improve high-risk decision-making. And that skill set is situational awareness. So let's start with a definition, and then we'll use that definition to build on our conversation today. Situational awareness is your ability to perceive and to understand what is happening in the world around you, while being mindful about how time is passing. Because as time passes, conditions change. And as conditions change, well, so should awareness. And then this next part is truly the gold of situational awareness. And that is being able to accurately predict what's going to happen in the future and to be able to make those predictions in time to prevent a bad outcome. So as you're preparing for, responding to, and operating in high-risk environments, I would hope that you would keep the definition of situational awareness in mind. There's just one problem. There's a lot to that definition, and there's going to be a lot on your mind. A lot of information to process, a lot of things being said to you, a lot of decisions to be made, oftentimes in very high stress and time-compressed types of environments. And to remember all of this could prove challenging. So I've got it down to just 3 words. If you can remember those 3 red highlighted words, perceive, understand, and predict, as you're preparing for and responding to and operating in high-risk environments, it will improve your situational awareness, I promise you. Now, what I'm going to share with you in this program is truly complex neuroscience. But if I went all complex on you and deep into the neuroscience, you would glaze over. Some of you might even stick an ink pen in your eyeball, like this is horrible. And I don't want this to be horrible. I want it to be easy to understand. I want it to be friendly. In fact, I want to make it so easy and friendly that you could take what you're going to learn here and share it with others. So to help me to make it friendly, I use analogies to help explain the complex and to make it simple. So the first analogy is building a house. Let's build a house. To build a house, you have to first have a foundation. On the foundation, you put walls. On the walls, you put a roof. The foundation for situational awareness, where it all begins, is what we call perception. Perception is the process by which you use your 5 senses to gather information about what's happening in the world around you: seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting, and smelling. If you were to talk with somebody and ask them, do you have good situational awareness? And if that person said, well, yeah, I think I do. And if you said, well, how do you know? Or what do you do that ensures you have good situational awareness? They might say in response to that, well, I pay attention. Or they might say, I'm always looking up, down, and all around to the things that are happening in my environment. Or they might say, I actively listen to the things that are happening in what people are saying around me. Or they might say, I conduct a size up. If you have this conversation with anybody and they describe their situational awareness using any of these terms, they're not wrong, but they're only describing the beginning. There are 2 more component parts to situational awareness beyond paying attention. Now I'm going to, yes, sir.
Can you share your screen?
Oh my gosh, my screen's not being shared? My screen is shared on Zoom. So hold on a second, Brian. You mean everything I've done this point nobody saw?
We didn't see the slides.
Oh goodness. All right.
The conversation was great.
Yeah. All right. Let me try this. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay. So shall I start over or just pick it up?
No, pick up. I think that's good.
Okay. I'm sorry. I was sharing it through Zoom. Everybody on Zoom saw it. Oh, goodness. All right. So can you still see okay, Brian?
Yes, sir. You're good.
Okay. All right. So I'm so sorry. We're all learning how to use this technology, aren't we? All right. So I'm going to pause here and give you a situational awareness best practice about the perception part of situational awareness. As you're operating in high risk, high consequence environments, what I'd like for you to think about is focusing on the 5 to 7 most critical pieces of information about what's happening in your environment. Now, Granted, in the environment you're working in, there may be dozens or hundreds of pieces of information coming at you. So here's the tip. Do not try to process the meaning of dozens or hundreds of pieces of information. Our brain does not have that capacity. And it all ties back to the limitations of our short-term memory. The average person's short-term memory capacity is about 5 to 7 pieces of unrelated information. And after that, if we try to process more information than that, our brain can become overloaded and overwhelmed. And we actually can get to the place where we might not be able to make a decision at all because of how oversaturated we are with incoming information. We literally can suffer from something called analysis paralysis, the paralyzation of the executive function of our brain to the point where we can't even make a decision because of the state of overwhelm we are in with the volume of information. So if I could use an analogy to kind of tie this concept together of focusing on the 5 to 7, think of it this way. If I took a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle and I dumped it out on the table, and I told you that every piece of the puzzle represents data or information, and I said, put the puzzle together, and asked you how long it would take, I would guess that the average person might say that that could take them a couple of hours to figure out all the pieces and get them all put together. But if I gave you a puzzle that the entire puzzle was 5 pieces, like a little 2-year-old or 3-year-old's puzzle, like big cardboard or wooden pieces of puzzle, and only 5 of them. And I said, put this 5-piece puzzle together. How long would that take you? I think you'd say seconds. That's what I want you to be thinking about in high-risk, high-consequence environments. Don't try to assemble the 1,000 pieces of data. I want you to look for the small number of the most important pieces of information you know to make your high-risk, high-consequence decision. And don't be caught in the trap of trying to process the meaning of everything. Just prioritize your inputs. You got 5 senses always on, always gathering information, seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting, smelling. Very few people have probably ever stopped and given any pause to wonderment of how the outside world gets into that 3-pound little blob of clay that we call the brain. And then how does the brain make sense of it all? Well, I'm going to pull the curtain back and explain the mystery. And I'll start with vision. To be able to see anything, there has to be light. In the absence of all light and total darkness, there's no vision. We can't see anything. There has to be light to stimulate the nerves inside of our eyes. So as you're looking around and wherever it is that you're working at or at home right now, if you can see things, it's because of light. Light is bouncing off of things, and some of that light is coming into your eyes. The nerves inside of your eyes then take those rays of light and turn them into electricity and send that electricity back into your brain as electrical impulses. The brain is a very dark place. Not one bit of light you see actually gets inside your brain. All the light ends at the eyeball. The only thing that gets back in the brain is electricity. As you listen to someone or someone, sound waves come into your ears. The nerves inside of your ears take the sound waves, turn them into electricity, and send that electricity back into your brain. The brain is a very quiet place. Not one sound you hear actually gets inside your brain. All the sound ends at the ears. So essentially, for our brain to be able to make sense out of all of the inputs, the whole process of perception is nothing more than electricity traveling down highways into the brain. Now, arguably, perception is the easiest part of situational awareness. All you have to do is be conscious, alert, oriented, and looking around, and you pretty much got the first part in the bag. Just keep your head on a swivel, and you got the first part down. Celebrate. Not so fast, because there's a problem. It's not always obvious or intuitive as to what we should be paying attention to. We can be all in paying attention to something that's happening off to our left, And that which is going to harm us or maybe even kill us might be something that's happening off to the right, and we're not paying attention to it at all. And in dynamically changing environments where there's a lot of things happening and a lot of information coming and going and morphing, what to pay attention to is not always an easy thing. So think of your five senses instead of them gathering up all that electricity. We'll come back to the jigsaw puzzle. Think of it as your five senses are all gathering up pieces to a jigsaw puzzle. Your eyes gather up some of the pieces, ears gather up some of them, nose, mouth, skin, all gathering up pieces to a jigsaw puzzle, sending those jigsaw puzzle pieces into your brain, trying to reach a destination where the puzzle gets assembled. And when those puzzle pieces reach the destination and the puzzle gets assembled, you advance to the second part of the situational awareness development continuum, the walls of the house, so to speak, and that is what we call understanding. Understanding means making sense out of what we see, hear, feel, taste, and smell, sometimes called comprehension, sometimes called having a moment of clarity. Now, let me pause and make the distinguishment between perception and understanding. Perception, we're not making sense out of anything. We're just gathering up unconnected jigsaw puzzle pieces with all of our senses. It isn't until we put the pieces together that we actually understand what is happening. As you're trying to understand what's happening in the world around you, I would like for you to adopt a situational awareness best practice. I want you to be inquisitive. I want you to adopt a mindset of curiosity. I want you to ask yourself some questions. Now, as I will tell you several times throughout the program to ask yourself questions, I don't mean figuratively, I mean literally. To use that little voice inside your head and ask yourself some questions, but then to force yourself to come up with answers to the questions. Questions like, what does this mean? I see this happening, but what's the deeper meaning beyond what I see? We see the world in 2 dimensions, but the world actually exists in 3 dimensions. So to ask this question is to ask, what is happening beyond what I can see as the surface clues or surface information? Even when we're listening to someone, whatever they say, we should ask ourselves the deeper meaning beyond what they actually said. Is there an additional meaning in the words that they use, the way that they said it, the inflection of their voice, their posture, even saying nothing, total silence can send a message, a powerful message. So to ask ourselves, what's the deeper meaning beyond the surface clues that are presenting themselves to me? The second question I want you to ask yourself is this what I expected to be happening? We come into every situation with expectations. Those expectations are usually set up by information that was shared with us before we ever got to where the problem is. Somebody called us on a cell phone, somebody text messaged us, we heard it over a radio that there was a problem that we needed to deal with, and we get in our mind what we're going to expect that problem to be when we get to wherever the problem is. And expectations are good because they can keep us from being surprised or caught off guard. But expectations can also be bad, very bad. Let me tell you how. Now, as I explain this, I know that I'm about to take you into the denial zone. You're not going to want to believe me. You're not going to want to believe that what I'm about to tell you can actually happen to you. You might think, no, that'll happen to somebody else maybe, but not to me. It can happen to you. And in fact, it probably has happened to you. You just don't know it. If you come into a situation expecting to see something, you may see exactly what you expect to see, even though it's not happening. You're hallucinating. If you come into a situation and you don't expect something to be happening, you may not see it, even though it is happening. you're reverse hallucinating. If you come into a situation and you expect to hear something, you may hear it even though it was never said. You come into a situation you don't expect somebody to say something, you may not hear what they said because you didn't expect to hear it. You come into a situation and somebody says something that you did not want to hear or you don't agree with. Your brain can filter it out and you'll swear it was never said. How can the brain play such tricks on us? Let me explain. We actually have two sets of eyes. We have the eyes on the front of our face, the biological eyes, but we have a second set of eyes inside of our brain called the mind's eye. And the mind's eye can see things very differently than the biological eyes see. The mind's eye can see things based on your previous training, based on your previous experiences, based on your upbringing, based on your religion, based on your belief in politics, based on your biases, based on prejudices, and based on expectations. The mind's eye sees what the mind wants you to see, which is very different than what the biological eyes and ears see and hear, because that's a purely mechanical process of basically taking inputs and turning them into electricity and sending them into the brain. But the mind's eye taps into all of these other experiences that we've had that can form a different reality. And when the mind's eye sees something different than the biological eye see, and if you're under stress, the brain is far more likely to believe your mind's eye than to believe your biological eyes or ears. And when that happens, you will experience a flawed perception of reality. It seems so easy. All we have to do is see things and we'll understand, or hear things and we'll understand, but it isn't that easy. And what makes it so challenging are these things that I call barriers that flaw awareness. Barriers are anything that block or prevent or impede your ability to have perception, understanding, or prediction. When I was doing my research on situational awareness and uncovering these barriers, I thought, how many could there be? 10, 15, maybe 20? Oh, how naive I was. There's almost 100 barriers that can flaw situational awareness. And we're certainly not going to cover all of those today. We're going to cover a few. We've already covered a few. In fact, hallucination and reverse hallucination. Let me introduce you to another barrier that can flaw your awareness. It's called sensory conflict. What does that mean? Sensory conflict means that the inputs coming into your brain from two or more of your senses are not in agreement with each other. They're in conflict with each other. So, for example, you hear something with your ears that allows you to believe that what is happening is situation A, whatever situation A is. But at the same time, your eye sees something that says, no, 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 no. What is happening here is not situation A, it's situation B. And situation B is very different than situation A. And now we have sensory conflict. The inputs coming into your brain are not agreeing with each other. Stated another way, the jigsaw puzzle pieces aren't fitting together. Well, what happens when the jigsaw puzzle pieces don't fit together? Well, when they do fit together, it's awesome. You have understanding and comprehension and moments of clarity. But when they don't fit together, it causes confusion. And the one thing that I can tell you for sure is your brain does not like you to be confused, especially if you're in an environment that holds the potential for risk. Because what your brain knows is if you are confused in a risky environment, you are vulnerable. You're vulnerable to make mistakes. You're vulnerable to make bad decisions. And you're vulnerable to get hurt and maybe even killed. So your brain is going to try to resolve this confusion quickly. And one of the things it can do to try to resolve this confusion is it can shift your situational awareness. And this is where it gets sinister. It can shift your awareness from that which is happening around you, what I call external awareness, to the confusion that's happening inside of your brain, an internal awareness. Your awareness shifts from that around you to that is happening in the brain. And when that awareness shifts from an external awareness to the internal awareness, you're no longer paying attention to that which is happening around you. You are experiencing a situational awareness barrier called mind drift. Mind drift means physically you are present, mentally you're somewhere else. The human mind will drift many times every day. Your mind is going to drift during this program. I can't stop it from happening, and neither can you. And you might be thinking, well, Rich, if my mind drifts while I'm sitting in this program, no harm, no foul. No one's going to get hurt or killed. But if I was doing something high risk or high consequence, well, I would never let my mind drift because there's too much potential that something really bad could happen if my mind drifted away when I was doing high risk work. So I would never let that happen, right? That's a wish. Your mind can drift away when you're doing highly risky work. You may not want it to, but it can. In fact, I will go as far as to guess that nearly every person on this program has experienced mind drift while doing a high-risk activity. I don't know that for sure, so I'll just give you a little scenario and you can judge for yourself if this has ever happened to you. Have you ever gotten into your vehicle to drive somewhere? And maybe that trip took you a couple of hours and you drove to your destination and you parked your vehicle and you wondered to yourself, how did I get here? I mean, there's part of this trip I don't even remember. For some of us, that may be the whole trip. You don't even remember. That's dangerous. Your hands are on the wheels 12 and 2, driving down the highway at highway speeds, and mentally, you're on vacation. You're not even thinking about the act of driving. That's dangerous. And you know what makes it more dangerous? The other people on the road, their minds are drifting too. It's not just you. Holy cow. How do we not get in more accidents with so many people with their minds adrift? Well, there's good news here. As your conscious mind drifts out of awareness, your subconscious mind can step in and say, I got this. I can drive the vehicle for you using subconscious programming. How does it do that? It may come as a surprise for you to learn that every driving experience you have ever taken, every one of them, is stored in your memory. Most of them completely outside of your conscious awareness. Like if I were to say, could you remember where you drove on October 1st last year? Unless there was something particularly memorable about October 1st, you'd have no memory of it. But if you drove somewhere on that day, your brain stored a memory of that driving experience. And every driving experience, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, for some of you, maybe hundreds of thousands of driving experiences are stored in your subconscious. And when your mind drifts away, the subconscious mind can step in, tap into those stores of knowledge that we call scripts, and play those scripts as almost like a computer program and allow you to drive the vehicle robotically. It literally can have you be able to act without thinking. You're not at all consciously thinking about the act of driving, but you're going down the road and you're keeping the car on the road and you're not getting into any accident. So the brain's ability to tap into the subconscious stores of knowledge, the scripts, and be able to play those scripts and allow us to do things automatically and robotically, we can put that in the victory column. Yay! Celebrate! Not so fast. Because there's something sinister that can happen here. When you're in a high risk, high consequence environment, and your mind drifts away, your brain can go into the subconscious and pull out stored scripts of previous knowledge, of previous activities, of previous training, and do things automatically without you thinking about it. And if it turns out well, you'll feel like a genius. And if it doesn't turn out well, there's a good chance you're going to have some people lining up to criticize you. And some of that criticism might sound like this. What in the world were you thinking when you did that? And the truth of the matter is, you might not have been thinking at all, at least not consciously. Your subconscious may have tapped into scripts of knowledge that you weren't even aware were in there, and cause you to make decisions and cause you to take physical action in the form of muscle memory and do things without even thinking about what you were doing. Where in the brain does the puzzle of understanding get assembled? There's got to be some place where those 5 highways of information come together. And there is a place where it happens. It's the place in the brain where you have consciousness. It is also the place in the brain where you have your conscious awareness. And it is also the place in the brain where you form your situational awareness. And I'm going to show you where it happens. And again, I'm going to be using an analogy. It happens right here on your magical, mystical Etch-a-Sketch. Every one of us has an Etch-a-Sketch inside of our brain. And like the toy says, it truly is a magic screen. Everything you see, hear, feel, taste, and smell travels down 5 highways and lands on your mental sketch pad as a picture. Everything gets drawn into a picture. If it doesn't get drawn into a picture, we don't understand the meaning of the information. The brain has to see the meaning of everything visually. Now, this happens outside of your conscious awareness that it's doing this, but everything draws a picture. Even when you're talking with somebody and explaining something to someone, your words draw pictures on their minds. But you knew this already. We even have a cliche that indicates we know this already. Perhaps you've been carrying on a conversation with somebody and you're not really sure they're getting what you're trying to say. So you might ask them, do you see what I mean? Do you see what I'm saying? Isn't that an odd cliche to ask somebody if they see your words? And the truth of the matter is they do. But if they don't get it, if they don't understand what you're saying, they might say, no, I don't see what you're saying. I don't see what you mean. We do see the meaning of everything that allows us to form understanding in our brains. So you have this picture on your sketch pad, and I just put a picture of a fire because I knew some of you were emergency response and some of you are on fire departments like I know Brian is as well. So I just put a fire picture on it. There's nothing important to the picture. It's just a picture of assembled jigsaw puzzle pieces. So whatever the environment you're in, when you get the puzzle put together, that's the picture on your sketch pad. That picture is then snapshotted or screenshotted and sent up into memory to do a search of your long-term memory database. This is a big search. How big is long-term memory? Huge. The capacity of the average person's long-term memory database is estimated to be about 10 times all the information stored on the internet. Huge. Access is a whole other issue. We can only consciously access about 5% of our long-term memory database, which means 95% of everything you've ever experienced in life is completely outside of your conscious awareness. So I have a little memory test for you. And Brian, I don't know if Brian, is there a way to have somebody like raise their hand and then you can turn their speaker on and they can say something so they don't have to type responses? How does that work in the platform that you're using there? Do you know if we can bring somebody up and have them speak?
We can. I don't have a hand raiser, but
okay.
They would use a comment box.
Okay, yeah, we can use that. for those that are connected with me through Zoom, and there are 4 of you there, you can just hover your cursor over the screen and bring up the Q&A box and just put your answer in the Q&A box. And then Brian, I'll just depend upon you to give the feedback of those that are on the Microsoft Teams platform. Okay, fair enough.
Got it. Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you remember where you were and what you were doing with vivid detail on the morning of September 11th, 2001, when the planes hit the World Trade Center towers? Now, some of you may be too young to remember. I've had people in my programs that weren't even born yet, and that's okay. But if you can remember with any vivid detail where you were and what you were doing, go ahead and put a response in the box as to where you were and what you were doing. So for those that are on the Zoom call, you can just go to the Q&A box, hover your cursor over your screen, bring up the Q&A box, and let me know what you recall about where you were and what you were doing. All right, so Jeremy says, yes, I was getting ready to go to a computer programming 101 at the university. I was watching the TV and having coffee. Jeremy, were you alone or was there other people with you? Just curious. I barely left my living room for the next 3 days. Jeremy, I hear you there. I was serving as a first responder and I had to pull myself away and leave, but let me tell you how hard that was. You're with your 3 roommates. Jeremy, you don't have to give me their names. I'm just interested if you remember their names. Just say yes or no in the box if you remember their names. William, sure do. William said, I was working, welding a platform for a paper mill. I bet, William, that you also remember exactly where you were in that paper mill and with some detail what you were doing. William, I'm curious as to how you came to know that the event had occurred, because if you were welding on the platform, did you have a radio on, or did somebody come up and tell you what was going on? I want to kind of capture the vivid detail recall that you are able to bring up. So Brian, do you have anybody that's chatted in on the Microsoft Teams?
I have a lot of responses, and very specific details, towns, where they watched it on the TV, playing golf, sitting at the fire station, filling out a run report, sitting at work, or listening to the radio. I was in elementary school class. Teaching a new hire orientation on my home.
All right, good. All right, so if you remember the details of that day, and it seems like many of you do, then that day is part of your 5% conscious memory database. And it was very easy for you to just instantly recall where you were, what you were doing. I asked somebody this program I was doing last week, they said they were eating breakfast. I asked them, do you remember what you had for breakfast? And they remembered in vivid detail exactly what they'd had for breakfast, right down to the point that they were having waffles, and they remembered that they used the very last bit of syrup out of the bottle on those waffles that morning. All right, so here's another memory test for you. And you can type in your responses for this one for me too, please. Do you remember where you were and with vivid detail what you were doing on the morning of August 13th, 2001? So just about a month or so before September 11th. And let me give you a hint if this will help you. All right. It was a Monday. So if you remember with vivid detail, not just, well, I was probably at work because it was a Monday. I want the same vivid detail that you offered for September 11th. If you can remember those vivid details, go ahead. Even if you can't, you can go into the chat box or the Q&A box and say whether you can or whether you can't have a memory of that day. And I'd just like to know if you do have as vivid of memories of that day as you do of September 11th. So go ahead and put your response, for those on the Zoom call, put your response in the Q&A box. And for those in the Microsoft, I don't know if they're typing into a chat box there or what. I can't see that box. So I have to depend on Brian to to so what I get.
Not a clue.
Yeah, yeah.
Is pretty much it.
Yeah. Not a clue. No way. Are you kidding? All right. So if you have no memory of that day, then that day is as part of your 95% memory database. I mean, there's a memory of August 13th, 2001 in your brain. So as long as you were conscious, alert, oriented that day, that is in your subconscious memory database. Now, that subconscious memory database is massively large compared to that little 5% conscious memory database. So you have that picture on your sketchpad, the puzzle pieces that are all fit together. That picture is then snapshotted or screenshotted, sent up into memory to do a search of the long-term memory database. If it finds a match that is part of the 95%, that big green space that's outside of conscious memory, it can trigger the sixth sense. Oh, hold on a second. My computer, just for some reason, just decided to lag. Hold on a second. My little spinny wheel is gyrating. I hope that only lasts for just a second. That might be based on how many, there we go, how many software programs I'm trying to run in the background to make this happen on 2 platforms. It can trigger the sixth sense. The sixth sense is the only sense that resides inside the brain and sends information outward. The other 5 senses are all on the outside of the brain and send information inward. And that sixth sense on the inside of the brain that sends information out is called intuition. The definition for intuition is strange. Intuition means knowing. Without knowing, how you know. What? How do we know if we don't know how we know? Intuition does not come to us as knowledge. Intuition comes to us as a feeling. We feel our intuitive response. And I'm going to give you 3 examples of how you might experience this. First, you might have the hair stand up on the back of your neck. Goosebumps go down your arms. Spidey senses start to tingle. All of a sudden, you're on a heightened level of vigilance for some perceived danger that's in the environment around you. You might have the voices inside of your head start to talk to you. That little internal voice called self-speak might say things to you like, "Are you sure this is a good idea? Maybe you should think about doing something different. I don't see this turning out very well." That little internal voice is trying to give you good counsel based on what it perceives as danger based on stored subconscious knowledge. But the most common form of intuition is neither of these, but rather the gut feeling. That knotted up, squeezed up feeling in our gut that something isn't right. The gut feeling is not psychological, it's biological. There's an emotional control center inside of your brain, and when you pattern match these bad outcomes from past experiences or training, the message goes over to the emotional control center, which sends down the message then down nerve impulses that travel down the spinal cord and split off and come into our gut. And when you get that knotted up, squeezed up gut feeling, that's your brain trying to alert you to the potential for danger, but from the subconscious, not from the little 5% conscious wedge. Your intuition is truly your brain's single most powerful red flag warning system designed to alert you to the potential for danger. And what makes it so powerful is how big the unconscious database is. It's massive compared to everything that we can consciously recall.
You've been listening to the Situational Awareness Matters show with Dr. Richard Gasaway. If you're interested in learning more about situational awareness, human factors, and decision-making under stress, visit his website, samatters.com. If you're interested in booking Dr. Gasaway for a program, or if you would like to be a guest on his show, click the Contact Us tab at the top of the homepage.
Perception is the foundation. Understanding is the walls. Now we have to put a roof on the house. The roof, the highest and perhaps most complex part of situational awareness, is prediction. Being able to anticipate what's going to happen in the future before it happens. Now, to be able to do this, we have to be able to get outside of ourselves, outside of the moment, and somehow mentally look out and see things that have not yet happened. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a process for how to predict the future. Now, this process doesn't involve a tarot cards or a soothsayer or a crystal ball. This process involves the very gifts that you have inside of your mind already, the gifts that allow you to make predictions. Now, Brian, I'm going to pause for just a moment again and say, is that siren too annoying, or can we continue to maneuver through?
I'm good. I'm just impressed you're not missing a beat.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, I'm trying to block it out. All right. So let me give you the process for how to predict the future, but I'm going to give you a disclaimer too that says there's no guarantee here. I'm not going to make you a promise that if you use this process that you'll be able to accurately predict the future of every possible event. It will improve your probability of being able to make an accurate prediction, but without a guarantee. Begin with the end in mind. To begin with the end in mind means that on the front end of a problem, whatever problem we're arriving at to deal with, on the front end, we pause before we start to do anything physical to address the problem. We pause, and in our mind, we create a target outcome or a goal or an objective or a benchmark, something that is the success whenever we are finished with whatever we're setting out to do. We haven't done anything yet. We're on the front end, and we set our goal. And then what I'd like for you to do is, before you start to do anything, is mentally transport yourself to the successful ending and look back toward the beginning. And there's something that happens when we do that that allows us to see things differently when we look backward on a problem like that. In fact, this lesson is so powerful that the person who wrote the #1 best-selling all-time business book worldwide referenced this very concept. His name was Dr. Stephen Covey. And the book that he wrote was called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And one of the 7 habits that Dr. Covey speaks about to business leaders is to begin with the end in mind. In fact, I used to call it something else. And then I read the 7 Habits book and I went, holy cow, Dr. Covey is talking about the very same thing that I'm talking about. He doesn't relate it to situational awareness, but it's the same concept of mentally transporting yourself to the successful outcome and looking backward on the problem for landmines and roadblocks and pitfalls and holes that you can fall into, and you see things differently when you're looking back on a problem. Now, on the front end, while you're looking back, before you start to do whatever it is, the work that you're going to do, there may be some situational awareness barriers that try to rear their ugliness and mess you up. And that is distractions, interruptions, and task fixation. So let me pause briefly and explain what each of those 3 things are and what they do to us. When you're working in an environment, you're paying attention to something in that environment. A distraction is something that pulls your attention away from what you want to be paying attention to, but entirely by accident. So you're looking over to the left doing something, and then off to the right, there's a loud noise, an explosion, a scream, a crash, something that makes you shift your attention and say, what was that over there? That's a distraction. Pulls your attention away accidentally. Interruptions, they pull your attention away too, but on purpose. Somebody comes up to talk to you, they pull your attention away. Somebody calls you on a cell phone, pulls your attention away. Somebody text messages you, that pulls your attention away. Somebody calls you on a radio, that pulls your attention away. And all of those are on purpose. They both have the same outcome. They both pull your attention away, but one occurs unintentionally and the other occurs with complete intentionality. Task fixation is when you go all in, paying attention to what is happening just in one tiny little space of your work environment and ignore everything else that's happening around you. You get small picture awareness. And in that small picture of awareness of task fixation, you lose sight of everything that's happening in the big picture around you, including the ability to mentally transport yourself all the way out to the end of the problem because you are micro-focused on the problem right in front of you. As you're trying to predict the future, ask yourself this question: where is this event headed, whatever that event is that you're dealing with? Where is this event headed if we don't do anything but watch? Now, this is not a strategy. I'm not suggesting you show up at the scene of a problem and do nothing. That's not what I'm saying. This is a mindset question. This question forces you to think ahead of where you're at and look into the future and see what is on the horizon. What bad things could happen 2 minutes from now if I do this? 5 minutes from now if I do this? 10 minutes from now if I do this? This question is a mindset question. It forces you to think into the future. And connected to this question is this question: how long is it going to take for an undesirable thing to occur? If I can look out into the future and see something bad that could happen, this now puts it on a timeline. How long is it going to take before that bad thing occurs? And a lot of that is a function of how fast the conditions are changing that you're operating in. What we're talking about here are windows of opportunity. You look out in the future, you see something bad, and you say, well, that isn't going to happen for 20 minutes, probably. Well, now you got a 20-minute window of opportunity in which to affect change and keep that bad thing from happening. But if you look out in the future and you say, I see something bad that could happen, and it could happen in the next minute, well, that might change what you decide to do because that window of opportunity is closing so fast. Every event that we deal with, every problem that we deal with unfolds at a certain speed, a certain pace. And it is absolutely essential that we keep track of the passage of time. So essential, in fact, that I built it into the definition of situational awareness. Situational awareness is your ability to perceive and understand what's happening in the environment around you while being mindful about how time is passing. If you lose track of time, by definition, your situational awareness is flawed. Tracking time means tracking how fast the windows are closing on our opportunities. If you lose track of time, you lose track of how fast those windows are closing on you. Then we have to set some expectations. Those expectations come from answering some questions. Questions like, can we change this outcome? I mean, we want to, we train to. Somebody probably called us there because there's a problem that needs fixed, an outcome that needs changed, but can we change that outcome? This is a tough question because I know our motivation will be to fix the problem, but can we? So here's a piece of advice. Don't get in the way of the outcomes that you can't change. Because if you do, you'll become a victim of the outcome. That outcome will happen anyhow, and it will make you a victim along the way. So don't get in the way of those outcomes that you just realistically look at and say, I can't fix this. Not right now, not with the situation the way it is. Are the conditions right? So what we have to do is assess the conditions. We assess the conditions during the perception and understanding part of situational awareness. Gather up intel about what is happening, assemble it together to form an understanding of what those conditions are. If the conditions are right, then by all means, be aggressive and fix the problem. If the conditions are right to do that. If the conditions are not right, if you take the time to gather the input, to size up the problem, and to assemble that information together and understand what is happening, and you make a prediction and you see a bad outcome because the conditions are not right, then be conservative in your action. Don't throw yourself into the way of an outcome that's going to occur anyhow, and you're not going to be able to stop it. Essentially, what I'm suggesting is to be smart, aggressive. Jump in and fix that problem when the conditions are right. But when they're not right, don't martyr yourself and throw yourself on a sword for conditions that aren't going to change whether you're in the way of them or not, but they just take you with it along the way. Do we have the right resources? We have to answer some questions as it relates to the resources, and one of the resources are people. So here's a question. It's a rhetorical question. You don't have to type your answers in the box. You can just think about this for yourself. Is everybody that you work with, all your coworkers, equal in knowledge, skills, abilities, fitness, and stamina? I think everyone's answer is probably no. Probably should be no. I mean, if you have somebody who's been on the job for 30 days, they surely would not have the same knowledge base of somebody who's been on the job for 30 years. If you have somebody who lives a sedentary lifestyle and they're, say, 50 pounds overweight, it'd be unrealistic to think that they would have the same fitness and stamina as somebody who runs 2 miles a day and does CrossFit 3 days a week. It's not realistic to think that. So if all those folks that we work with are not all equal in knowledge, skills, abilities, fears, phobias, fitness, and stamina, then let's not hold the same expectations of everyone as if they all have equal abilities. Assess everyone's abilities individually. In fact, we develop 5 situational awarenesses, not 1, 5. The first is your assessment of you, your personal awareness. What is my knowledge, skills, abilities, fears, phobias, fitness, stamina? Where am I at? Where do I need to be? How do I get from where I'm at to where I need to be? What is my personal development plan that gets me the knowledge and abilities and fitness of where I need to be a contributing member of this team? Personal awareness. The second awareness is team awareness. That's the awareness of everyone that you work with and work for. Knowledge, skills, abilities, fears, phobias, fitness, stamina, of my peers, of my subordinates, of my bosses, of people that come from other organizations or other departments or agencies in to help us to deal with this problem. The knowledge of the team, abilities and limitations. The third awareness I call resource awareness. That's your knowledge of everything that isn't human that you depend upon to get the job done. Tools, equipment, personal protective gear, monitoring equipment, computer software, machinery, your intimate knowledge of the abilities and limitations of everything that isn't human. The fourth awareness is the actual problem that we're dealing with, the incident awareness, and your knowledge of the clues and information about what's happening in the moment with that particular problem. The fifth awareness is shared awareness. That's the ability to get everybody who's working together on that problem on the same page of understanding, sometimes called a common operating picture, sometimes called having a shared understanding. The left hand knows what the right hand is doing. We all have the same understanding of the strategy of what's to be accomplished and the individual team's efforts and how their efforts are interconnected and intertwined and how we're supporting them or hindering them based on the efforts of the various players. Shared awareness. The next question is, can we, with our knowledge of those 5 awarenesses, and that's important, we have to be knowledgeable of all 5 of those, can we operate faster than the conditions are changing? Can we operate faster than the windows of opportunity are closing? To be able to predict the future, we have to use our imagination. To use our imagination is to use our mind's eye and to see what's happening out ahead of what is happening in the moment. So what I want to do is to wrap this up, I want to sum up the situational awareness development process. And if you have a question, you can go ahead and type your question into the box. If you're on Zoom, you just hover your cursor over the screen. It'll bring up the Q&A box. You can put your question there. And I'm not sure exactly how it happens on the other platform, but I guess that all of you are really familiar with that. So let me sum up the process. It begins with perception. Perception is the step where we gather the intel about what's happening around us, seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting, smelling, gathering up the piece to our jigsaw puzzle. We then take those pieces, send them down the highway to the destination of the Etch-a-Sketch, and we assemble the jigsaw puzzle on the mental sketch pad. That puzzle, once assembled, then gets snapshotted or screenshotted, sent up into memory to do a search of our long-term memory database, trying to find solutions to the problem that we're dealing with. If you were to get the benefit of intuition, and there's no guarantee that you will, but if you were to get the benefit of intuition, this is where it would happen in the understanding part, as you're searching through past experiences. Then after we understand what is happening, the next step is to make a decision. A decision is a choice from at least two options. If you don't have at least two options to consider, you don't have a decision to make. When you're traveling down the road and there's no intersections, you don't have to decide, do I turn left or right? There are no intersections. But when you come to a T in the road, you have to make a decision. Do I turn left or do I turn right? The definition of a decision is a choice from at least two options. And what I suggest, especially if you're working in high-risk environments, is those two options should be an aggressive option and then also a conservative option. The aggressive option, if the conditions are right, whoop, fix the problem. The conservative option, if the conditions aren't right. And then after we make a decision, the next thing we do is take an action. Make a decision and take an action, right? No. I don't ever want you to do that again. Don't ever make a decision and then take an action. And you're probably thinking, Rich, have you lost your mind? That's what follows decisions, is actions. We're action-oriented people. We make decisions, we take actions. Don't do that. What I'd like for you to consider doing is to insert a step between your decision and your action. A small step that only takes just a few seconds. After you make your decision, pause and make a prediction. It's a big step. Make your decision, pause, visualize the outcome of your decision. Look that decision into the future. How far into the future? Depends on how fast conditions are changing. Sometimes that look in the future might be a minute, it might be an hour, it might be a day, it might be a week, it might be a month. Depends on how fast the conditions are changing on the environment that you're working in. But pause between the decision to make a prediction, to see the outcome of your great decision. Let your predictions drive your actions, not your decision, but the prediction of your decision. If the predicted outcome of your aggressive option is good, then by all means, implement your aggressive option. But if the prediction of your aggressive option, when you mentally look into the future, into your mental crystal ball, isn't good, then consider another option, a plan B, a plan C. Before you go all in on a plan that you see isn't going to work well, the prediction allows you to see that. Look for another option, including a conservative option. So that concludes the program of Foundations of Situational Awareness. What we want to cover is basically what does it mean, definition, how do we develop it, the three component parts, what are a few ways it can go wrong, which we've talked about, some of the barriers, and then intermixed with it, little pepper and salt on it, or some best practices, things to consider. So I'm going to pause and allow you to type in any questions that you have, or Brian, I don't know if you want to turn turn on the microphones and allow for some dialogue, we can do that too if you want. However you would like to do it, they can type it, or we can have it be voice type interaction. And you let me know.
Yeah, I've got people typing questions.
Okay.
They can also do it voice-wise, so they can unmute themselves, and we can have dialogue as well.
Okay. For the people on the Zoom call, if you want to come up and ask your question on the Zoom, and that's Garrett and Jeremy and William, if you want to just raise your hand and I'll unmute you. I don't know if you can unmute yourself, but I can unmute you. So if you just raise your hand, then I can unmute you and we can have a conversation. So Brian, go ahead and give me a question if you got one typed in there.
Yeah, so the first question is, how might task fixation be similar to planned continuation as a barrier?
They have to tell me a little bit more about what they mean by plan continuation. But while they're thinking about how to frame that, let me say a little bit more about what task fixation is. So when you go hands and eyes coordinated on physically doing something, you could say you're focused on your task. I'm focused, which is good to be focused because it might keep you from losing a finger, all right? But if you focus on that task for an extended period of time, the focus can turn into fixation, which means that your attention is at the micro level and you're missing the other clues and indicators about what's happening in the bigger picture of the things that are around you, which could include things that could harm you, but it could also include things that would indicate that what you're doing at the micro level, at the task level, doesn't make sense anymore because the bigger environmental conditions around you have changed. So the best practice here is to periodically, when you find yourself focused for an extended period of time, and the definition of extended period would be based on how fast conditions are changing. So if the conditions are changing slowly, you don't have to do this as often. If the conditions are changing quickly, you got to do this fairly often. And that is to unlock from the task level, mentally, visually, unlock from the task level, and just give a look around and a listen around to the bigger picture. So you don't become completely disconnected from your environment, which we can do. And you don't have to be in a high-risk environment. You can do this right when you're on your computer and get so fixated on the work that you're on that you lose track of the things that are happening around you, even, in office work. So, and if there's some other clarification to that, if I didn't answer to their satisfaction, then I can take another swing at it. For those that are on the Zoom, if you want to go to the Q&A and type a question, I can address it there. Do you have another one, Brian?
I do. Is there any value in trying to control the barriers that you mentioned to help us improve our situational awareness?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Now, some of the barriers are easier to control than others. For example, it's very hard to keep yourself from hallucinating. And the reason it's hard is because you don't know when you're doing it. So really, to be able to proactively counter something, we almost have to have a conscious awareness of the fact that we're doing it. But one of the things that we can do to keep ourselves from having this flawed perception of reality is to not allow ourselves to be consumed by our expectations. Come into the situation with a mindset of inquisitiveness, of curiosity, and not one where you think to yourself, I already know what the problem is and I already know what the solution's going to be. Because when you come in with that kind of preset expectations, it can keep you from seeing and hearing what's really happening, or cause you to see and hear things based on what you expect other than what really is happening. So the best practice tip for that one would be to maintain that level of open-mindedness and inquisitiveness and curiosity, so that you don't lock on, once the mind locks onto something, the mind can be very stubborn and hard to unlock and look at something differently once the mind's eye believes it already knows problem and solution. So come into every problem as if it's a novel problem, and be inquisitive and gather intel, and not say, well, this is just like the 28 other times I've dealt with this problem. Look at it like it's a new, fresh problem, size it up, gather information, gather facts, not what your mind wants to pull out of past experiences, but gather the intel based of what is happening in the moment. As far as all the other barriers, because there's almost 100 of them, what I will say is the good news is that not all 100 of them carry the same level of risk and consequence as others. So, and it depends in part on the environment that you work in too. Like noise is a barrier to awareness. If you work in an environment that is very noisy, that can impact your ability not only to hear, but it also can impact your ability to critically think your way through problems. Probably every one of us has been in an environment that we can say is so noisy, I couldn't even think. That's what I'm talking about when I say noise as a barrier to awareness. Not noise that keeps us from hearing, but noise that keeps us from being able to think our way through a problem. So there's different best practices for different barriers. And that's where I'd say use the resources on the website to help you to learn more about the barriers and best practices for the most challenging ones. So if you want to say, well, what are the most challenging ones? I'd say this is a no-selling zone, and I truly mean it, but back behind me, I don't know if you can see it, is I wrote a book on situational awareness for the workplace. And in that book, I talk about the dirty dozen situational awareness barriers and then best practices for how to deal with them. Now, let me say that I'm not trying to sell you the book, because here's what I'll do. I'll tell you that I have a podcast episode dedicated to the dirty dozen situational awareness barriers. So you don't have to buy the book. You can just go listen to the podcast episode, and I'll talk to you about the dozen most challenging situational awareness barriers for workers in high risk, high consequence, dynamically changing environments. And you can listen to that episode and learn from them and never have to buy anything from me. So the dozen, those would be ones you'd want to learn about, because they can kill you quick and you might not even see it coming. Other questions, Brian?
So how does high or impactful training affect your situational awareness and your ability to pull some of that subconscious forward when you're making a decision?
Okay, define impactful training.
More realistic.
Yeah. Okay. Now I get what you're saying. Think of training as the storing of knowledge and skills. So when we train, we actually develop two kinds of memory. The cognitive memory, the what do I need to know? Why do I need to know it? And when do I need to know it? Data. But then we develop a second kind of memory called kinesthetic memory, or what some would call muscle memory. That's the how do I do it? So we actually have two memory databases that come together that allow us to do things in a high-risk environment. First is the what do I need to do? And the second is how do I actually do it? Now, what we hope is that we can marry up those two memories and we think about what I should do before we actually do it. See, that's the thinking part of a worker's, being able to be a critical thinker and a resilient problem solver. Says think first. That's the whole foundation of that. Make a prediction before you take an action. Think first, and then decide your course of action and physically do it. So when we're training, that training should be high fidelity, meaning as realistic as we can possibly make it with a concern for safety. But I mean real, like the environment's real, the sights are real, the smells are real, the stress is real. Make it as realistic as we can, and then also make it emotional. Because the two things that allow things to take a permanent place in the 5% of memory and allow us to draw things quickly out of the 95% memory are repetition and emotions. That's why many of us had such a vivid recall of September 11th. Emotions attached to the event and repetition cycles of every year we get reminded of it on the news. So constant repetition cycles of training, realistic, high fidelity training, and emotions attached to the learning. And those are two ways to help us to be able to recall quickly and accurately the what am I supposed to know? Why am I supposed to know it? When am I supposed to do it? Those are all the cognitive. And then how do I do it? The muscle memory part.
Great. We got another one.
Okay.
Some resilience engineering thinkers would suggest that situational awareness is improved by cognitive diversity. Any thoughts?
What do they mean by cognitive diversity?
This is me, Colin. So cognitive diversity would be, like you mentioned the notion of team awareness. So in your world where you think about this from an instant command standpoint, there are people who play specific roles to help us make sense of things. So resilience engineering likely would review situational awareness as an adaptive capacity. It helps us to make sense of an emerging situation.
Yeah.
So you walk through the perception and the processing and the prediction. That in a nutshell is where resilience. That's the space they operate in. But then how that takes place, when we think about how we improve that, we want to, someone with the authority may not necessarily have expertise. And so how does the authority make sure that you've got cognitive diversity would be you've got the appropriate expertise helping you make sense of it.
Yeah. Okay. Now I understand the question. Thank you for clarifying that. So if you have any familiarity with oh goodness, Sutcliffe and managing the unexpected. So what they suggest, which I'm a big fan of, is defaulting to expertise. Not defaulting decisions to who has authority, but defaulting decisions to who has the expertise to know the right thing to do. And those aren't always the same person. In fact, I think what you'd know is a lot of times the person at the highest level of authority is not the person who understands intimately the problem and the potential pitfalls of that problem. So as you talk about cognitive diversity, what I hear you asking is there a benefit to having the players on the team with a diverse, well-rounded kind of experience to different aspects of the problem? In other words, a frontline worker and maybe somebody in engineering and maybe somebody who's a chemist, that depends on what the problem is, and having the diversity of different types of knowledge base that comes together to form the shared awareness. The answer is absolutely yes. But what we need most of all, and I don't want to, turn this into an area that I don't necessarily want to go, but we need leaders who are willing to defer to the smartest person in the room about that problem. And unfortunately, that's not always the person who has the authority to make the decision. And good Lord, it sounds like I'm talking about present moment politics, and I'm not intending to, but whether we listen to those with the expert knowledge or not. Sometimes the people with authority think that their authority gives them the authorization to do what they think is best and overrun the knowledge base of the smartest person about that particular problem. So to that extent, your cognitive diversity is essential to good decision making. Now, sometimes, I mean, might as well be honest, sometimes you're in an environment where the decision has to be made so fast, you don't have time to assemble the team that gives you that cognitive diversity. Some high-risk decisions you'll be alone. By the time anybody gets there to help you, it's done. You either made the decision, implemented something, fixed the problem, or you got in the way and became a victim of it, or you stayed out of the way and let it happen, but it happened so quick you didn't have time to assemble a cognitively diverse team of people to help you in the moment of your high-risk decisions. But if given the choice, I think it's always best to have 2 minds or 3 minds. Always better than 1 mind in the room when you can. You can't always, but if you can. And if I didn't answer the question to your satisfaction, then by all means hold me accountable and make me talk more about it so that I do make sure that you get what you're wanting from this.
I think you got it, Dr. Gasaway. Your situational awareness piece, it does sound like 5 pieces of it, team, resource, incident, care. It would seem like there's an element of time that is constraining depending on the urgency that you're responding to. So you may not always have everyone with a shared awareness or a mental picture. As resources begin to come to bear, you have to take time to get you up to speed or designate that to somebody. So there's the notion of are we solution finders or problem solvers, with the distinction being where it depends on what resources you're bringing to bear.
Right, and sometimes those resources are readily and quickly available, and sometimes those resources take time to gather, and that intel takes time to gather, and all the while, a lot of times there's not a pause button on the problem. In other words, we can't just shift the problem into neutral while we gather up all the right resources to effectively deal with the problem. Sometimes the decisions need to be made quicker to prevent a bad outcome. And sometimes we can. Now, the good news is a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times, well, first of all, your personal awareness, that should all be well developed before you ever have the problem to deal with. You should know what you know and know what your limitations are before you're dealing with any particular problem, be that a cognitive problem or a physical problem that requires a degree of stamina. Team, a lot of times if we're working among the same team members in a workplace, we could know something about those team members in advance of depending upon them in the moment. And I'll give you an example of this. I was working with an oil refinery, and in the oil refinery, they have the operators that are in the field, out on the sharp end of decisions and consequence. And then they have people that sit in a control room and monitor computers that are keeping track of what's happening in the pipes out in the field. So when something happens and product gets out of the pipe, the people in the field are on the sharp end of potentially really bad outcomes. And they depend on the people who are in the control room to be able to give them good information and to keep their head about them and to know what they're talking about. Okay? So a shared awareness between that person on the sharpest end and that person in the control room is pretty essential. And this one refinery that I was working with, I was stunned to learn that the people in the field don't know the people behind the computer. Like I had them say to me, if you put that person in a lineup, I wouldn't be able to point them out. I might be able to tell you who they are if I heard them say something because I would recognize the voice. They have no relationship. This wasn't like all of them, but a lot of them had no relationship between the person on the sharpest end who's going to depend on a person on the other end of that radio to be able to keep their head about them and give that person good information that is going to allow that person on the sharp end to make a good, quick, right decision. And they don't even know each other. And it's like you're just like blindly putting your faith in somebody that you don't know if they know what they're talking about or not. And it goes both directions. The person at the panel doesn't know the person in the field as to how experienced they are, how knowledgeable they are. So one of the things that I suggested to them is y'all need to get some get to know you sessions so you can develop this team awareness. It's a lot easier to trust somebody when you know that they've been around for 20 years and you know they know what they're talking about. Because in the moment, it's not the time to try to be vetting, does this person really know what they're talking about or are they full of it? So that team awareness can be developed in advance. The resource awareness often can be developed in advance, knowing the tools and equipment and limitations and abilities of the non-human things that we depend upon if you're taking the time to learn about those. So the two that are the most challenging is the actual incident itself and then the shared awareness, because if you're in the middle of dealing with a problem, somebody else comes into that problem and says, hey, how can I support you? How can I help you? You know, if you're already fighting alligators, you could have a limited amount of time and capacity to try to get that person exactly up to speed so that the two of you have a shared awareness. In fact, of those 5 awarenesses, the shared awareness is the hardest one because it's rooted in communications between humans, and there's nothing easy about that.
That's good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I don't have any more questions on our end. I know we're bumping right at 3:30.
Okay. All right, so Brian, if you want to send something out that tells anybody if they have, well, there's my email. You don't have to send it out. There's my email. If anybody has any questions, they can just shoot me an email and I can help them out. Or if they want, a lot of us, I'm working at home with nowhere to be. So if somebody wants me to give them a call, I can give them a call and talk with them too if they want some help that way.
Absolutely. So I'll get that out. I appreciate you coming on. I think it's just the topic and all the pieces that make this make situational awareness are just hugely important to everything that we do, and not just in the emergency realm, but in day-to-day life. So I appreciate it, and thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you, Brian, for the invitation and for everybody who attended. I really do appreciate it.